system. You'll see later on in etc hosts, for example, that the fully qualified as well as the short name will exist in the etc hosts file. So the installer populates the appropriate files, or the files accordingly. The gateway is your default gateway, the way out of your subnet or out of your VLAN, and that's 192.168.75.1. The primary DNS server, as we've mentioned, we've got an all-purpose network infrastructure system which runs DHCP and DNS. It is the SUSE Enterprise 10 box, and it has an IP address of .100. If you recall from our graphics, that's 192.168.75.100. If there were other DNS servers in the environment, we'd specify it here for secondary DNS, or later on we'll show you how to configure DNS manually, the DNS client manually, using the DNS resolver, and ensuring that the DNS resolver uses those additional DNS servers. Later on we'll take a look at that. That's the etcresolve.conf file. So let's recap. We have a static association with our primary interface, ETH0. We have not configured ETH1 and 2. We've manually assigned a host name which applies to the system to all interfaces, so it's a global application. It is a global context. We've assigned a default gateway and at least one primary DNS server. Again, we've got three interfaces. The Linux kernel assigns the interfaces in the order in which they're detected on your PCI bus. So this ETH0 interface should be the first network interface on the PCI bus, which for this particular server is the embedded gigabit interface. Subsequent interfaces are assigned 1, 2, up to N. So ETH represents the fact that the interface is an Ethernet interface, whether fast or normal Ethernet, or gigabit Ethernet. ETH is the prefix used to cover Ethernet-related interfaces. And again, it applies to 10 megabits per second, 100 megabits per second, 1,000 megabits per second, and subsequent 10 gigabits and so on per second. ETH1 is the second interface, ETH2 is the third interface. But again, for now, we're concerned with ETH0. For other types of interfaces, such as tunneling interfaces, PPTP interfaces, and others, Linux uses the appropriate prefixes such as PPTP, ton for tunnel. They're logical. They make sense. So when you run ifconfig at a later point, you'll see those logical interfaces as they're represented. And when you see those prefixes, you'll know what their purposes are on your system. So with that said, let's move forward. We've spent enough time discussing how to configure a static IP version 4 assignment. We need to select the region of the country that we're in. It knows that we're in New York, but our mouse just happened to be located over Australia. However, the X marks the spot indicating the time zone that's applicable to this system. The system clock currently does not use UTC, so we'll take this off. Usually you'll find on properly configured systems, especially servers, the BIOS is set to UTC. When you set your BIOS to UTC, meaning GMT time with no offset, you can then have the operating system adjust its clock whenever it boots by setting an offset based on the time zone that you exist in, such as UTC-5. Our system clock is set to UTC-5. It tells you here when you hover, use this if you want to automatically switch between normal and daylight saving time. Don't use this if you have other operating systems on this computer which adjust the hardware clock. But we don't have other operating systems. We would like daylight savings time to be affected, which means later on we'll update our BIOS to reflect UTC time and then have the OS change that time appropriately. The modern BIOSes will also update themselves to reflect daylight savings time, which the operating system will get when it boots, and as a consequence the OS will have the appropriate time. So there isn't much to worry about here. Let's click on Next and move forward. So far we've covered quite a bit. We need to indicate a root password. Let's go ahead and do so. And later on in the security section we'll discuss how you can tighten the security of your system, including passwords. But ideally you should set a long enough password, at least 8 characters, and perhaps with varying cases such as upper, lower, and numerical values to make the password stronger. So we've set a password for root. The root account is always the first account created on Linux systems, regardless of distributions, along with other daemon accounts. That tells us here the default installation includes a set of software applicable for general internet usage, such as a web server, and software development category packages. These two groups are important. Software development allows us to compile packages that we will subsequently download off the net. Now, although we're going to reinstall the system many times, it's important that you turn on or enable software development packages if you intend to compile packages. For example, you may download a program off the net that needs compilation, such as a tar.gz file, which contains source files for a program that is of interest. Let's say Nagios, for example, the system monitoring application suite. You may download source and need to compile it. If you need to compile it, you'll need a suite of tools including Make, GCC, and others. The software development category of packages includes the applicable tools. Web server includes the Apache web server. It's always useful to have a web server, but may not be for your environment. You need to determine whether or not you need to install the web server. You can further customize the software selection now or after the installation of the operating system using the software management application. If you customize it now, you'll be presented with options regarding the different packages, and let's click on Next so that you at least can see the interface as it is applied. So, we have various categories on the left-hand side. Desktop environments you need to pick, applications, development, servers, base system, and languages. These are the classes or categories used by Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Hasn't changed much since even the version 9 of Red Hat, which is basically Enterprise Linux 3. The default desktop environment is GNOME. This is the default desktop environment for most Linux distros. It's clean, lightweight, and works really well. However, for more of a user-like experience that's comparable to Windows, you may want to investigate the KDesktop environment. We'll go with GNOME because most of our work doesn't or isn't contingent upon having a powerful graphical environment, although GNOME certainly is. Beyond desktop environments, we've got another class, applications. Within applications, we've got subclasses such as authoring and publishing. In the lower area, you'll see the description associated with the class. It tells you that you've got tools such as DocBook, which allows you to convert to HTML, PDF, PostScript, and so on. Navigate to editors tells you that it includes certain editors like Emacs and VI, which we need, and it tells you the number of packages of the total installed. If you click on optional packages, you'll see the ones that are not installed by default. So here we see some are installed and some are not, and they're suggested or selected, that is, based on the suggestions of users. VIM Enhance is installed, which is a utility that we'll use to modify text files later on. Engineering and Scientific has various packages for that community. Games and Entertainment, Graphical Net, which includes a web browser, graphics such as the GIMP. Click on optional packages, you'll see a list. ImageMagick, which allows you to manipulate images, GIMP, which is not installed, and others are made available. Sane, which is a scanner software which allows you to scan locally and remotely. Office Productivity. Click on optional packages, you'll see what's available. This is a document viewer. Sound and video. The system doesn't have a sound card, so most of these packages are useless, which we could just simply turn them off. Text-based net. And if you're interested in Red Hat certification, you should get familiar with the Lynx text-based internet web browser, MUT for email, and other utilities like TFTP, LFTP, which we'll be looking at. Cadaver, which is a WebDAV client in the event that you want to interact with WebDAV-capable servers, and another Lynx-like text mode browser, eLynx. All are important tools to help you get through the exams, as well as to be able to connect to HTTP resources without a GUI environment. Let's move to development. You'll see, because we indicated that we want the software development packages installed, a great deal of them have already been checked. minus, of course, what you see, such as Java development, things related to K-desktop, and so on. But for X and for basic development tools, we've got them, which includes Make, GCC, so on and so forth. In the servers section, you'll find various classes of servers, such as infrastructure servers like DNS, FTP, legacy network server, which tells you it includes the older protocols like RSH, Telnet, which we try to avoid like the plague because they're clear text based, which means they transmit your credentials in the clear, and it means middlemen or sniffers or people in between can intercept your credentials, which you don't want. Mail server. These are packages which allow you to function like a mail server. Postfix, SendMail, IMAP, so on and so forth, which all of which we look at later. MySQL, we look at later on. Network servers. We've got more infrastructure components, DHCP, Kerberos, and NIS. These are commonly used network infrastructure services that are made available with this distro of Linux. Whether or not you'd like to run a news server, a PostgreSQL database server, printing support, which is provided by CUPS or Common Unix Printing System, server configuration tools, which are tools which allow you to configure, graphical tools that is, which allow you to configure your server in a graphical setting. The web server, which we selected earlier on, is now selected, which includes, of course, the Apache web server. There are many other modules which have not been installed, which we can install later on depending on whether or not we need support for them. But the common ones like Mod Perl, Mod Python, PHP are all installed. These are the common tools. Tomcat is not installed. Squid is installed. That's the proxy server. Webalizer, which allows you to parse your logs, is installed. So we have some things here that are of interest. And last but not least, beneath servers, we've got Windows File Server. This is the Samba server. If you click on this, your server will become a Samba server, which means it will appear to Windows clients and Samba clients to be a Windows server. There's a base system group which includes some administration tools, most of which are installed, 13 or 14, and other tools. Languages, what support you'd like once the system's up and running. Scroll down, you'll see what's currently selected. There are all sorts of languages across the world, and they're supported by most OSs, such as Red Hat Enterprise. If you need additional support, go ahead and select it, and then you'll have it available. And perhaps if a user uses your system, they can customize their environment to use the language that you've provided support for. With that said, without spending too much more time, let's move forward in installation so we can